नमस्कार, सत श्री अकाल, राम राम सा, खम्मा गणी, वणक्कम। आप सभी का ऑल्टरनेट मीडिया में फिर से स्वागत है। फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम आई हैव गौतम देसुराजू सर। लेट मी इंट्रोड्यूस सर। बहुत सारे लोग जानते होंगे, स्पेशली द फ्रेंड्स फ्रॉम द साइंटिस्ट कम्युनिटी एंड फ्रॉम द साइंसेज मास्टर्स एंड ऑल। सर इज अ स्ट्रक्चरल केमिस्ट. He taught in Hyderabad University for 30 years. He is been with IISc from 2009 onwards. Sir has got, I have lost count of the awards, international and national awards that he has got, but he has definitely mentored minimum 50 students for PhD, hundreds of postdoctoral associates. He has authored and co-authored many books. He's been chairperson for Government Council of Bose Institute. He is also distinguished professor in UPES Dehradun and member of academic council of Rishihood University. Apart from that, sir got honorary doctorate from Argentina University, and sir was also president in International Union of Crystallography. Sir got PC Ray medal from the University of Calcutta. That's a very, very brief profile, but it runs into pages, I would say. And I'm really honored to have Sir on my show today. Sir, a very warm welcome on the show.
Namaskar, and I'm happy to be in the alternate media today. And I think this will be a nice conversation. Let us see.
Sure, sir. Sir, you went to watch The Vaccine War, and I think that's a movie that is talk of the town right now. और आपको स्पेशल इनविटेशन पे विवेक अग्निहोत्री जी लेकर गए. सर, मूवी कैसी है? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, ट्रेलर्स तो इम्पेक्टेबल थे, मूवी कैसी है जी?
बहुत बहुत बढ़िया है. And yes, Mr. Agnihotri was kind enough to send me an invitation for the preview, which he had in Bangalore a few days ago. And so I really enjoyed the movie. It was, I have seen both his previous movies on the Tashkent files and the Kashmir files. So I liked both of them, and I like this one also. It's a very nice movie to put it in so many words.
इस मूवी के बारे में स्पेशल क्या है जो एकदम टच कर जाता है? मतलब आपको ये रियलिटी के एकदम पास में है, या फिर इसमें जो साइंटिस्ट का स्ट्रगल है, या फिर इंडिया को जो लोग चैलेंज करते हैं, और द स्नेक्स विद इन आवर ओन कंट्री? What are the points that actually touched you?
I would say that yes. I mean, it is a movie on a scientific topic, and the science pervades throughout the movie, and explaining some of the scientific nuances to a lay audience of the kind who are going to see this movie. I think it's going to be released on the 28th, which is basically tomorrow. And it's quite a challenging task. There have been few movies which have dealt with scientific topics, like the life of John Nash, for instance, and then the movie on how the Enigma code was broken in World War II. There have been a couple of memorable movies on scientific topics in recent times, and I think Agnihotri's movie scores quite high when you start rating it with other movies. And for those of the viewers who have seen his other two movies, it is not a documentary. I would say Kashmir Files gave me the impression of being a documentary. And here, this is more of a movie, in the sense that, like a typical movie maker, it's a story. And so one should not expect 100% adherence to all the facts. So he has taken what one might call poetic license, especially bringing in certain human interest elements throughout the movie, actually. So the fact that all these scientists who were working under immense pressure during the pandemic time are also human beings. They have real lives with real parents, with real husbands, with real wives, with real children. all of whom were undergoing serious trauma. Well, all of us, everybody in the world underwent a trauma for those 18 months to 24 months when the pandemic was with us. So these scientists were especially under special pressure. And I think Vivek has brought out this aspect exceedingly well. There is an incident. The person who is playing Dr. Bhargav, the whole movie is centered around the personality and leadership qualities of Dr. Balram Bhargav, and how the Indian Council of Medical Research, along with the National Institute of Virology in Pune, were brought together under his leadership to produce the formula or the recipe for what eventually became the Covaxin in the hands of Mr. Krishna Ella. And there is a very poignant scene, where at the time when people were dropping dead, this is a scene that for me it was sort of a scene I shall always remember. Outside Dr. Bhargav's office, there is a chowkidar who is a Nepali fellow called Bahadur or something. So he's running around and making himself useful like typically these chaps do. And suddenly one day Bhargav, during the height of the second round of deaths in May 21, he comes to the office and then he looks around and then he says, "Where is Bahadur?" or something. And nobody answers. And then you realize that Bahadur has succumbed to the disease. And the expression on Bhargav's face is wonderful. So there is real acting in this movie. So it is definitely a movie and it is not a documentary. And people should not go to the movie and then start criticizing it, saying, this thing was not shown correctly, this thing was not shown accurately. I think, like all other movies, it is meant to capture the life of very ordinary scientists. I mean, extraordinary in their work, but ordinary in their human problems. How they coped at a time like this. I mean, those of us, for example, I am working scientist in the Indian Institute of Science. And basically for a year and a half, I was confined to my house and therefore not able to go to the lab or be with my postdocs. Well, that's another story because I used that time to write a book which is called Bharat India 2.0, which is in an area quite different from my domain expertise. But well, some of us were able to amuse ourselves in these ways, but here were scientists who actually had to go to the lab and therefore interact with other people. And therefore, they have a much higher chance of infection. One of my, if I may just share a personal aspect, one of my sons works in a bank. And the banking sector was not exempted. The banks had to remain open. So in a completely deserted street, a vehicle would come and pick him up and take him to his place of work. And, the kind of anxiety that would cause within the immediate family members and so on, it's quite considerable. So all of us, when we see the movie, there is something about the COVID pandemic that rings true in our own individual lives. We may not have developed the vaccine. We may not have been working in the lab during the vaccine times. But there is so many scenes in the movie, and I think it's best if the people go and see the movie themselves, that they will suddenly figure out something that has a connection with their own lives. And in this sense, I feel the movie is remarkable because one could say the Tashkent file, which he Excuse me. The Tashkent files, for example, was a purely political theme, and it was made many years after the death of Lal Bahadur Shastri. So most of the people perhaps didn't even know who Lal Bahadur. But on the other hand, you have a situation like the Kashmir files, which people didn't even know what was happening, and the movie, which was more of a documentary, uh, was able to give us an idea about something we never knew, but we couldn't relate to it directly because those of us who lived outside the Kashmir Valley in those terrible years could not relate to it personally. But this particular movie of Agnihotri, since all of us were involved in COVID one way or the other, we were all under basically in lockdown condition. So there is something in that movie that will appeal to everyone. That is why I feel the appeal of this particular movie is it's more of a human story. What do real people do when they are suddenly thrust into an extraordinary role? So the scientists who were responsible for this, incidentally, many of the key players were women. And this is another aspect of the movie that is brought out very well. And this is the peculiar burden that women scientists face in trying to manage both the home and work. And this is something that men will never really understand. We may try to help, and we would, of course, like to cooperate as much as we can with the women in our families who happen to work. But only a woman possibly would understand what it means when he shows another scene where one of the scientists has, I think, a 10-year-old or 11-year-old son whose whole personality has started changing because he's not able to see his mother for long stretches of time. And then he shows very well the total inadequacy of the father in consoling the child. And this really gives you a feeling that for little children, actually not even little children, even grown adults, their relationships with their mother and their father can be quite different. And when they say mother is mother, this comes out very, very distinctively in this movie. And the son just wants to do small things with his mother. He wants to show her some drawing or something like that. He doesn't understand what is happening. And his father has told him many a time that your mother is doing some important things which will help everybody to get better. He tries to understand, but how much can you understand when you're 10 or 11 years old? This again is an example of a sort of a human problem of this COVID. And I think this is a very gentle movie, this vaccine files. It is not sensationalistic, it's not political like his earlier movies. It's a very gentle movie. And it touches on the finer aspects of human nature and human personality. And at the same time, there is a terrible dread of death, All of us have felt it. All of us have been through that. There was some feeling that, tomorrow morning I may not be alive. Most of us, luckily, did not get the disease, maybe. But we know of somebody who knew somebody who got the disease, or we even know somebody who knew somebody who died because there was no oxygen. This is not so uncommon. It has affected all of us. And so I feel that, especially coming a year later, for about a year, we have not worn masks and we are going about. When you see the movie, you start asking yourself questions. Can something similar come back? If it comes back, what do we do? Are there already things that have changed in our bodies that we don't know about? All these. So if it is something that is making you think, then I think that makes it a good movie. I'm judging it more as a movie and not from the scientific viewpoint. Although, if you now want me to talk about the
Yes, sir,
scientific
definitely.
viewpoint, I'd be happy to do
Yes.
so.
Scientific viewpoint, because a lot of the people, I would say majority of the people, don't know the life the scientists live. They think they go to lab, they have lunch, and then they have just pal batti style meetings, and then that's it, nothing more than that. But scientists actually have real struggles, and especially when it comes to Indian scientists, what I have seen, what I have witnessed, the struggle is real.
Well, I don't want to really get into the problem of Indian scientists because the problems are very severe. And there are many reasons why the problems of Indian scientists in particular are very severe. And for those who are interested in this, the many places where I've written and spoken about this, and even from my webpage, this is something I have been constantly talking about for the last 20-25 years. The lot of the Indian scientist is not good. But in a general sense, I would like to tell viewers of the program, I'm not trying to be very supercilious or I'm not trying to be very arrogant. But let me tell you, friends, that to do good science is very, very, very difficult. It is not easy. It is not easy in the least. Even if you have a so called crack academic record and you've passed all the correct exams and all the correct times, and if you have got the correct job in that correct, wonderful place, assume everything went like a breeze for you. It still doesn't mean that you will do science of a quality that will stand the test of time. Science is a very strange mix of the known and the unknown. And much of one's skills as a scientist, I found, is the ability to have a mysterious instinct for things, and that's not enough. You should know when to follow that instinct and when you should not. This is far more difficult. So you see, science actually is a very, very subtle discipline. It is certainly not like, see, the original professions, the noble professions, are farming, law, medicine, and science. These are the professions that have come down to humankind from antiquity. But compared to the other three, farming, law, and medicine, which are also subtle in their own ways, the subtleties of science are very, very strange and very devious almost. I think famous scientists have talked about the fact that God is not malicious. Yes, God is not malicious, but sometimes one wonders
He
why he
punishes the
prevents you from
responsible.
seeing the truth. You know, when you after you see the truth, it looks so obvious. Then you wonder why it took you so long to get to that particular point. Now, this happens to many scientists at many times, and Agnihotri has, I would say, captured a bit of this feeling. Because when you put people, scientists, under severe stress conditions, they were still able to perform. And here, let me tell you about the vaccines themselves. Everybody knows that there is something called Covishield, which most of us took. Then there was this Indian vaccine called Covaxin, which is described in this movie. And then we've all heard the term mRNA vaccine. And if we have not heard that word, we've at least heard the words Pfizer and Moderna. Now, without getting into boring details, the way in which these three types of vaccines work is very different. Covishield is a bit more like the traditional vaccines. A weak version of the disease vector is injected into the body, just like cowpox is injected and give you immunity from smallpox. So that is the traditional way of making a vaccine. This was the vaccine developed in the UK by a UK company in Oxford, I believe. Now, that is a very traditional type. Next, coming to the mRNA, I mean, as a scientist, I would say that it is probably among the three the most beautiful solution to the problem. But what is the most beautiful is also not necessarily the best. Beautiful in the sense that it is a technology that makes the body make its own virus. So it sends you are injecting something called messenger RNA. And this messenger RNA then interacts with a very complicated molecule in the body called ribosome, which is nothing but a little protein factory. And it makes the virus. It actually makes the COVID virus. And therefore, it protects you against all parts of the virus, unlike Covaxin and Covishield, which only protect you against what is called the crown region of the virus. Because the Covishield and Covaxin are but approximate solutions to the problem, whereas mRNA looks to be an absolute solution. But having said all this, now, okay, let's take up finally Covaxin, because that is the topic of...
If I simplify, the Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson and Johnson, these vaccines were mRNA based,
Yes.
while the Indian vaccines were protein based. They
Yes.
force the body to produce protein, while their vaccine forced the body to produce mRNA. The difference
Correct.
between absolute and
Yeah.
the very nearby.
Correct. But even among the two Indian vaccines, they were a bit different. Covishield was an absolutely traditional technique. Just put a weaker form of the disease into the human being and then allow the human being to generate the autoimmunity. Now, Covishield, and this is where the ICMR contribution is really good, this use of the so-called dead DNA. That is, an inactive form of the virus is injected. And this prompts the body to develop the autoimmune response. And let me say, I'm no virologist, and I'm not even a biological scientist. I'm a biological scientist. I'm a chemist. But let me say that even with my general knowledge of the matter, that this was a bold, new strategy. And there was no guarantee that it was going to work. And the fact that we were able to gamble and take the risk, and the government had enough patience to allow ICMR to go along this route, especially in a situation where it might have been very easy to simply say, the usual thing that we Indians say, everything foreign is better. So let us go for Pfizer and Moderna. Even though it was very costly, it required very low temperatures to preserve the vaccine. It would have been impossible to maintain those low temperatures, minus 15 or minus 60, something like that. Imagine going all over rural India and trying to maintain those low temperature conditions. It's impossible. Whereas both Covishield and Covaxin only requires a temperature above 0 degrees centigrade. Just like the kind of temperature you get in a refrigerator. That's all that you need to keep that. So certainly the Covishield and Covaxin were more robust. And this is a point that is brought out. But I am told that there were influential people who were still rooting for the Pfizer and Moderna. Plus, and Agnihotri brings this out in the movie, that Pfizer Moderna people were not willing to give a guarantee that if the vaccine fails, that they would be held responsible for anything. So the terms and conditions given by them were, in the minds of the government, so lopsided and one-sided that they decided not to go for it. And I think this is one of the truly good decisions made by our government, not to listen to these usual fellows. There were people saying 500 million people will die, and only Pfizer and Moderna will work. You know, now we find that 1 year after we have all stopped wearing masks, I don't know, I'm just making a qualitative statement here. I have not heard of too many people in my circle who are getting COVID now. I don't know of anybody who has taken too many booster shots. I think I personally and my immediate family, we took one booster after vaccine number one and vaccine number two. And I think many stopped with the first booster. But I do know of people regularly who are taking 4 or 5 boosters. I know people in Europe too. A friend of mine in Italy was telling me that he was taking still fourth booster, fifth booster, and so on. So why are they taking all these boosters? And why is the disease seems to be recurring in those countries? The other day we are told that the wife of the US president got COVID, and so she could not accompany her husband to India for G20. Now I haven't heard of, I mean, wife of president of US should be living under conditions where she should not be picking up all these things. So why is that disease still knocking around there? Now people are asking more disturbing questions. That was this mRNA vaccine really that good? And were the Americans just told that it was good? What is the role of Dr. Fauci in all these things? Yesterday I saw a newspaper report saying that he prevented CIA from investigating certain aspects of this. What is the connection between the US, government, the Chinese government, and the WHO? Why did they not release? I mean, China probably knew by December 2019 that there was something serious going on there. At least in Wuhan lab, they knew something. Why did they not tell anybody for 3-4 months? Should they not have put the alert? And why did so many people in China die after all of us stopped wearing masks? This zero COVID strategy of the Chinese also doesn't seem to have been very good. So there are a lot of unanswered questions. So in such a scenario, when we really didn't know much, we took a gamble, and the gamble worked. This is something remarkable because Indians are not known for taking risks. I mean, part
It
of the
was,
reason I said that we don't have
wasn't
time
it a,
to discuss Indian scientists is that Indians, as a rule, do not take risks. We don't like to take risks. But we took a huge risk on this one and it worked. So this is really good science, if you ask me. This is
I
the
would like to
visionary
little
scientists
deviate from
who
here.
think.
It's a small question here.
Yeah.
Protein generally is not harmful for the body because it's a
Mm,
protein, right? You have DNA, you have mRNA, and then you have the protein. So protein is what you
mm,
say. The I know after transcription and translation, wo science terms में is the end result
mm,
of a need for the body. So
mm,
protein generally doesn't turn to be harmful for the body. Generally, exceptional cases I
mm,
will put it aside. While when you are playing with mRNA, you are playing roughly at, I would say, genetic level,
yes.
at least the mRNA level. So now what we are seeing in Europe and all those, because now we have deviated from the movie, so I would just probably make a small point here. When you are making a change at the mRNA level, you are introducing changes into the genetic structure of the body, and probably that's the reason the side effects of mRNA-based vaccines are higher compared to the Covaxin and the
You're probably
Covishield.
right. You're probably right. I think what happens in the Covishield Covaxin is that exactly how they build up the autoimmunity. When you say a weaker version of the disease, probably the body is much better at internally compensating itself out to avoid this kind of complication that you will get with the mRNA. And so maybe mRNA looks good in theory, but there are still too many unanswered questions about what it may do to the regular healthy DNA of the body. And I think this is where in science the devil is always in the details. There is nothing else, only the details. So, in trying to be too clever by half, probably we have made a big mistake. And so, you see, both Covishield and Covaxin, if you think about it, you are letting nature do its own thing. You are just giving it a little push. You are
push.
not trying to take over nature's role yourself, which is what you are trying to do with mRNA. So this is at a philosophical level also, if you take it, probably we are better off with those old type vaccines. And the dead DNA strategy of ICMR, that is really new science. This is very good. And one should say that from a scientific point of view, of course, the fact that it worked so well has helped it, and Vivek has made a movie about it. But the fact that we were able to take a risk, and I have seen so many Indian scientists, science administrators, big people who direct science policies and all. We are very, very risk averse, and this is very bad for science. So you see, it's unavoidable that I do not talk about Indian science. The fact that we do not like to take risks, we don't like to take risks about anything. The fellow gets into some IIT or something, he just wants a safe job with a high salary, that's all. He's willing to forget his engineering or whatever he did. He just wants to go to IIM, and then he wants to get a very fat job in Bombay or someplace like that. That's all that he wants. So from the beginning, he is told, please don't take risks. And that's another thing here that one should talk about slightly. Why do I say scientists, good scientists take risks? Because good science means asking good questions. And when you start asking question or any questions, you are questioning some kind of authority. Some big scientist before has said something, and then you ask a question which might confound him. You are told, don't do that. In India, you are told, don't do that, because he is a big scientist. If you question what he's saying, that he will get angry, and then your career prospects will go down.
Your PhD is gone. Postdoc is
Your
gone.
PhD is gone, whatever is gone, your research grant is gone. But you see, a person like Galileo dared to question Aristotle, no? Everybody was saying for so many years, almost 2000 years, because Aristotle said so, it is the sun goes around the earth. Why? Because Aristotle said so. So Galileo said, who is Aristotle? This kind of questioning is what Indian scientists don't do, and what the ICMR scientists did. They said, okay, those fellows have got some mRNA, they have got some Moderna, Pfizer, whatever it is. But this is our idea. So let us see if it will work. And also, I would say that with my knowledge of government funding of science, government itself is very risk averse. It will fund projects, even when small projects are given. So many committees I've sat, people will ask, what is the proof of concept? Arey Baba, if there is a proof of concept, then after some time it is not even science. It is just an MSc lab experiment. It is not research anymore. Because research can fail as many times as it succeeds. So why are you going on asking for proof of concept? What is this proof of concept anyway? If I had a good proof of concept on a good idea, I won't even publish. I will go and try to file a patent somewhere. I will not come to you and ask you for money to, do more research on this topic and leak out all my ideas which seem to be working. So maybe Indians were forced to get into this risky venture simply because of the urgency of the matter. It could be a purely economic reason. Maybe it was felt that we simply can't afford the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, and I don't think we could have. And there's
Yes.
another thing, there's another point here which I would like to mention, that in many of these scientific things, especially in times of pandemic, it is better if you have a halfway cure that cures people halfway, instead of trying to wait for something that is so perfect that it will cure all the people all the time, because that will not happen. And with time running out and with people dying left and right, I think what they did was actually perfect. And this, I think, Vivek's movie brings out in a very, very nice way. So, I mean, we've talked about the human side of the movie and then the scientific side. He does describe it very well, although I'll say in a lighter way. The labs of the Indian Council of Medical Research do not look like the luxurious places that have been shown in the movie.
Exactly, because I've seen it myself in my labs when
I
I was
know.
doing
I mean,
the
anybody who has visited the ICMR headquarters will not recognize the pictures that are shown in the movie. But I guess this is where, again, the artistic, poetic license is all right. You know. Right.
Yes, yes.
But
So,
that's
what
a
is the
light
most what is the most important aspect of this movie, apart from which element just touched you?
Which element touched me? I feel that it touched me because it gave me a feeling of confidence that given a suitable situation, this, by the way, my own humble submission is that unless the situation was so urgent, government would not have taken all these risky decisions. If the situation were any less urgent, we would have fallen back to our old status quo method of doing things. Some big committee would be formed. They will form some silly status quo decision will be made and nothing will emerge out of it. I think simply because the water had come up to this level and they could not afford to have millions of people dying tomorrow in the street, which would have led to the fall of the government or God knows what. They decided to go for a risky course of action. But what the point that I want to make is that when thrown a challenge, Indian scientists are able to meet the challenge.
They need to
But
be pushed for
but the
that, right?
stimulus has to be extremely grave. It reminds me a bit of the financial situation we faced in 1991. We were going along merrily. Some secular state, socialism, socialistic pattern of society. Rajiv Gandhi likes computers. We were living in some dream world of our own. And suddenly we are told that all the gold in the country is put in some aeroplane and taken away to London. At that point, we are facing an existential crisis. So they were forced to make the reforms. I do not credit Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh and Chidambaram and all as great geniuses. They were brought again up to this point so that they had to change their policy. COVID was another moment like this for science. It came up to this point. Probably we couldn't afford Pfizer and Moderna. Otherwise, we might have gone in that route. Who knows? It's very difficult to speculate now. And as they say, success has, many followers. But so since we have succeeded in this, I think people will look kindly at the whole matter. But
So
we
I actually
Bharatiyas we should not again fall back in a status quo kind of a thinking in this committee business. These committees and status quos have ruined Indian science today. And if you notice the scenes in the movie where they had small committee meetings, there were people who disagreed with the position being taken by Dr. Bhargav, and sometimes Dr. Bhargav would disagree with what the scientists were saying. But finally, one position prevailed. When the two options were very different, one position prevailed. And this is something that does not happen in committee meetings in Indian science. This I can say because I've attended so many of them. When there are two different opinions, what this committee finally does is it produces some watered down version, common minimum program of both these opinions. And since the opinions are so different, the watered down decision becomes absolutely almost useless. And most of our decisions are like this. When I see Vivek next time, I'll tell him, I only wish committee meetings in our scientific setups were as cut and dry as what you have shown in your movie. Probably in the case of COVID, they were, but that's again because of the grave urgency and people dropping dead all over the place. So maybe under such stimulus, it has forced us to do all these things, which has worked out well.
right. So I actually wanted to probably make a point and ask for your views also. See, now this is purely science. when you have Covaxin, which is working on protein, and if that doesn't succeed, you always have the mRNA level. That is a one step ahead. With Covaxin, we were working on the basic structure, coming back to the base, coming back to the basic form. So, in case Covaxin would not have worked, they always had the option of mRNA going a higher level, because if the people understand,
I would slightly disagree with you. If
no,
Covaxin had not worked, I think we would have gone back to the lower option of Covishield, which still worked. I mean, I and most Indians took Covishield. We were not given a choice. Some hospitals were supplied Covishield, some were supplied Covaxin. And I was one of the people, I and my wife, one of the earliest chances of getting the first shot and the second shot and the booster. We went and took it. And so the only thing available in Bangalore at that time was Covishield. Very, very few places had Covaxin. So we just took what we got. But I think instead of going as what you call a higher option of mRNA, I think we would have fallen back to the lower option of Covishield, which is probably would have worked just as good. There's nothing wrong with that Covishield vaccine. It is a traditional oldest type of vaccine. Polio vaccine is based on something like that. Same.
yeah,
And we all know that it works. So the long and short of it seems to be that it is best to let nature do the maximum part of the job. You don't try to play God with this mRNA vaccine and all this. I started off by saying it's a very beautiful solution, but that kind of beauty is still not beautiful enough. Nature is much more beautiful than that.
right. Sir, out of 10, how many marks would you give to this movie? If
Depends what you're comparing it with, no?
now, overall, because like I've hardly seen Bollywood movies. I have been mostly into Hollywood and other, I would say, other countries' movies. So when I saw the trailer, it was very powerful, punching,
But
realistic.
I want to be very clear in my answer. With what movie do you want me to compare it? Do you want me to compare it with that Enigma movie?
No, no, no.
How
That
they
that is
how they how
high
they how they
science.
break the Enigma code, or do you want me to compare it with Beautiful Mind, John Nash's life? This one rates along with some of these things. It is comparable to this stuff. I have
I
not
was
seen this
comparing with
latest
the Indian
Oppenheimer.
standard,
Oppenheimer
actually. I was
movie,
not
मैंने नहीं
comparing with
देखा. I have not
Bollywood.
seen Oppenheimer.
I was not comparing it with the European or the American movies. I was actually comparing with the Indian kind of movies that sometimes you have had sci-fi movies here and there.
No, no,
So in that
they are not, in my opinion, they are not of a standard. I am actually comparing this favorably with Beautiful Mind and
beautiful mind. So that's the
Enigma.
level you're giving it. That's it.
It's a good level because even that Enigma story, that Bletchley Park, the place where they broke the German cipher, which allowed them to win World War II, they talk about the real day to day human problems. The main fellow there, I forget his name, was actually gay. And all the problems that he faced being a gay man and trying to hide it in those times, that is brought out very well. So, this is again a human problem. And John Nash, of course, everybody knows about his tragic life and the fact that he had to go through so many personal vicissitudes and at the same time produce these wonderful results. The movie on Ramanujan also, I think that is also a good one to compare it with. I saw that movie and it also compares well with the Ramanujan movie. So I would say as a science type movie, this does pretty good in my opinion.
Yes. Sir, direction, how many marks? I'm going point by point now. Direction,
Direction.
acting,
Wait.
storyline.
Direction. Yeah, I'm quite strict. People who have known me in scientific circles know that I'm very strict. So my answers may not please everybody, but since they are my answers, I will give it confidently. Direction 6.5 out of 10.
That's really strict, I would say.
Hmm. No, they are my
And
answers, and I am a very
acting,
strict. Acting 8 out of 10.
wow. And the storyline?
8.5 out of 10.
Wow, that's coming from you. Then I think it's a must watch for all the people, be it scientists, be it anybody. If you don't want to watch it just for anything, just go and watch what the scientists did, just for them.
No, I think people should watch it just to realize the nature of the scientist personality. He brings that out very well indeed.
I know, I know. Few of the people that I knew when I was doing my masters in botany from Delhi University, so you wouldn't know they had to leave their baby crying right in the middle of the night just to complete one experiment, and they had to put the timeline. So they'll be staying somewhere near Delhi University, so that and that to imagine people having kids, they'll be coming in the middle of the night, opening the labs, and then fixing up the time for the next experiment or something like that, then go back home, take care of the baby if it is crying or it is awake, wherever, sending them to school, and then back to the same routine.
Let,
It's
let me
difficult.
also let me also mention a final point that behind every person, man or woman, who finds some satisfaction in a scientific life, there is a very warm and supportive family who understands the curious nature of our personalities and are willing to give us enough time and space to do things in a certain way which many people might call eccentric or quixotic. Several times when I'm within the family and we're talking about something, then my wife or one of my sons will say that, no, you're not even paying attention to what we are saying. You're thinking about those molecules and crystals. And it is true, I am thinking about those molecules and crystals at that time. But the fact is that they're able to, in my case at least, they were able to take it so well. And to just realize that the scientist in that family is slightly different from other people in other professions. That I have not seen a case where somebody who got real satisfaction from doing science or did well in science did not have that kind of family support. So I think wives, husbands, children are all extremely important in generating this kind of a domestic ecosystem. This is something that is not realized. They think of us as people wearing these white lab coats and going there and doing some crazy things, but they don't realize that there is another part of the life, which is the domestic part. And the fact that unless we have a rock solid support this side, we will not be able to go and do those crazy things in the lab.
True. So there is one more element. Would you like to touch upon that? A famous journalist who's, in response to her, the famous line, India can do it. Would you like to elaborate on her character or people like her character, who's been continuously, maliciously, consistently, sincerely trying to pull Indian scientists down?
And she said India can do it.
No, no, she didn't say it. It was Dr. Bhargav, because I saw the trailers in
Correct,
that case.
correct, correct. Oh, yes. I mean, that personality shown in the movie is shown very well. That lady acted very well. I would say I don't know her name, and I don't know her name in the movie also. But she's probably a composite of 3 or 4, 5 people whom I recognize from the TV and social media, some men and some women, who are consistently trying to bring this down. And I would say that that depiction is shown very, very well in the movie. And her acting was particularly good, including her final breakdown scene in the very end. Even that she did quite well. That's why I say this is more of a movie, it is not a documentary at all. It is more of a movie and less of a documentary.
Interesting. Interesting.
Mhm.
So
No,
would you like,
that was a good. There are at least 3, 4 people whom I could recognize there, in the personality of that lady.
wow, nice. One particularly one. Everybody knows
let's
from the Kargi
let's
war.
let's not name names in some
No, no, I'm
this
not
program.
naming anybody. I wouldn't dare that.
I think we all know. I think we all know whom we're talking about.
Yes. So would you like to add any point towards the end, towards the conclusion?
I would tell all the people to go out there and watch it. And there is no bigotry, there is no politics, there is no religion aspect, there is no caste aspect, there is nothing of any of the kind of divisive things that we find in our country today, most regrettably. And in that sense, I think Mr. Agnihotri has rendered yeoman service to us in making this nice movie that will make all Bharatiyas feel very, very good about our country.
थैंक यू सो मच, थैंक यू सो मच सर फॉर ज्वाइनिंग. जाने से पहले सभी व्यूअर्स से रिक्वेस्ट है, प्लीज डोंट फॉरगेट टू लाइक, सब्सक्राइब एंड शेयर द ऑल नीट मीडिया. इफ यू वांट टू कंट्रीब्यूट, यू वांट टू सेंड सजेशंस, एप्रिसिएशन, फीडबैक, ऑल द लिंक्स आर गिवन इन द डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स. इसी के साथ जय हिंद, जय श्री राम, हर हर महादेव. थैंक यू सो मच सर.
भारत माता की जय.
भारत माता की जय सर. थैंक यू.